we will bring back to the stage Doug Ford superhero and Microsoft MVP, David Musgrave. Today he will be showcasing his session, Replacing Visual Basic for Applications in Your Microsoft Dynamics GP System. Please stick around after David's session for a live Q&A.
Hey guys, welcome back. Long time no see. Say hi to my quokka friend. All right, so today's session is going to be covering replacing Visual Basic for applications in your Microsoft Dynamics GP system. My name's David Musgrave. I'm the owner and managing director of Winthrop Development Consultants. I'm a Microsoft MVP. I've been in the GP world for a long time, 30 years now, and I'm based in Perth, Western Australia, on the other side of the planet, which is why I don't get time to come to many of the actual conferences in person. We're going to be covering an introduction, which we just did, a bit of VBA history and its features, some of the limitations of VBA. We'll talk about VBA compatibility and the fact that VBA is discontinued. So then we'll look at what alternatives you have for VBA, which includes Dexterity, Visual Studio Tools, GP Power Tools. We'll discuss reports, and we'll also discuss moving on from the VBA mindset, and I'll explain more about what I mean by that. So the history and features of VBA. Basically, the form modifier was built right from the beginning as part of the Dexterity environment. It's actually the same form creating tool that is used by Dexterity developers, but has some limitations so that you can't break things. But there is no way of adding any business logical scripting in the forms modifier. So in version 4 of GP, they added VBA. And it uses Microsoft VBA 6.0, which is actually hosted inside the GP application. Resources can get added to VBA, which then exposes the Dexterity resource to VBA. As far as licensing goes, you can either license the modifier, which gives you the ability to create and execute code, or you can have the customization site license, which is execute only. VBA allows you to add windows, scrolling windows, and fields to VBA, and reports and fields can be added to VBA. It does allow you to interact with system dialogues, which is actually something that Dexterity natively cannot do. It allows you to create user forms if you need to create an extra form. You can create modules with reusable code, which can then be called from elsewhere. You can also create references between Dexterity dictionaries. So one window in, let's say, the Dynamics dictionary can call something in the project dictionary. The easiest way to store data is using the Dynamic User Object Store, which is actually the SY90000 table in the company database. But you can also use ADO if you wanted to. So some limitations is it only works on the user interface. So we cannot see anything underneath the user interface. We've got no access to any of the business logic, the procedures and functions that get called when from that interface. We also don't have access to what's going on at the table levels within the Dexterity table buffers. So if you want to get access to other tables, then we need to use ADO, ActiveX Data Objects, and we can create a connection to SQL Server using the user info get object to get us the password to log in. Actually, it gets us the connection, I should say, rather than the password. So VBA's got some compatibility issues. Historically, there was always tricky to get it working on a terminal server or a Citrix server, and often required you to apply additional registry permissions to get it active. More recently, we've had VBA crashing after certain updates to Microsoft Office, and then it also now fails to work on the latest versions of Windows Server 2019 or later. So basically, the team in Fargo communicated with the Office team, and they were, it was confirmed that the version of VBA that's packaged with GP has reached end of life and is no longer tested, which means that anything could go wrong or has gone wrong, and it won't work. If you do want to try and keep VBA running, there is a 6.5 security update, which you can download using this link. It might get you working again, but in general, the best thing you can do is move away from VBA. So what can I do to replace VBA? You've got a few alternatives. So we've got the ability to code it in Dexterity. We can use Visual Studio Tools. If you use the Visual Basic.NET language, you'll probably find it's the closest to Visual Basic for applications, but you can also use Visual C# if you'd prefer. And you've also got the option of using GP Power Tools, developer tools to replace the VBA functionality. The pros and cons of Dexterity. First of all, Pro is it's the native language of GP. It's built into GP. It's what GP is running on. We have full access to all of the underlying business logic, all the functions and procedures. We can access the table buffers. There's a number of features that we can access that are Dexterity-only functionality that you can't get to from any of the other tools. Anything you do in Dexterity would be web client compatible if you want to run it on the web client. But we got some features that what we don't have is you can only modify windows in the core dynamics.dic. We can't modify windows that are in third-party dictionaries. It cannot see modifier added fields. It also does require a separate development environment, and you will need to restart GP when you deploy the chunk files to install onto the GP environment. And every time you upgrade GP, you will need to update the Dexterity code to match. If you were to use Visual Studio Tools, we do have access to most of the underlying business logic. It's about 92% of the functions and procedures are available. The ones that are not available are because they're using some sort of parameter that is not compatible with Visual Studio, something that Dexterity can do that Visual Studio doesn't like. You do have access to the table buffers. And if you use Visual Basic.NET, the syntax is very similar. Again, it does require a separate development environment. It does require you to restart GP each time, and it does need upgrading every time you update your GP. It cannot access Dexterity-only functionality. However, I have a product, the Visual Studio Integration Toolkit, which has some free modules in it, which do allow you to get to some of that Dexterity-only functionality. If you create WinForms with Visual Studio, they won't work on the web client. And by default, you can't use Visual Studio Tools with reports. However, there is a technique that you can use where using report writer functions. The other thing is that you will need to run the DAG tool or the Dictionary Assembly Generator tool on the modified dictionaries to create a DLL, which will allow you to reference modified windows or reports, just modified windows. So if you use GP Power Tools, it does use Dexterity as its main scripting language. So it will have access to all of the underlying business logic and the table buffers and all the Dexterity-only functionality, and is web client compatible. It does have the ability to call SQL, C#, and VB.NET scripts, so you can use other code if you need to perform things that Dexterity cannot do. It can see and work with modified windows. With the Visual Studio Integration Toolkit Customs Forms module, you can create windows, and in fact, a whole load of template windows already built for you that you can use. There is no separate development environment. There's no need to restart GP, and there's no need to upgrade code because it's stored in SQL and just works on the next version. You've also got other features like being able to create web services, URL drillbacks, and scheduled and timed tasks. So when it comes to reports, the way that VBA handles the reports is different to any of the other tools. So basically, it runs after the report has been generated by the report writer, and any changes you make using VBA cannot be seen in the report writer. So you can't use a change made in VBA in a calculated field. Dexterity, you can create entirely new reports. And you can also use additional processing into temporary tables to gather data and then display that. We can also use the placeholder custom RW functions as described in this KB article that allow you to place other data or perform other functions from the reports. Visual Studio tools can register against those same placeholder RW functions, and then that's how GP Power Tools also creates custom RW functions, which allows it to return data from other locations. So the concept of moving on from the VBA mindset, basically VBA was is designed around the user interface. So everything you do needs to be focused on something that's happening on the user interface. So just to give you an example, there are 7 ways that a maintenance record or card record can be saved. With VBA, you'll need to actually deal with all 7 of those ways. With Dexterity, you would put one trigger on the one script that all 7 of those ways eventually calls. So that way you can just access it from the back end and trigger on the right event. So this is where I talk about, I've written a blog article that talks about moving on from the VBA mindset and gives you more of the methods to actually make things work in a more Dexterity or Visual Studio way of thinking. So the rest of this session is now demos. So I'm going to be swapping in and out of PowerPoint and go into our GP. So I'm actually running this at a higher DPI because I wanted to make sure you guys could read this nice and easily. So here we have a modified version of item maintenance. And I've added this web URL field into here, which allows me to add a URL against every item. I can drill back on it and it will open up a tab in the browser. Let me just close that again. And if I was to print the report and print the modified version of the report to the screen, you'll see that the Winthrop URL has been included on that. So that's all been done with VBA. If we take a very quick look at the VBA, we can just say customize and go into the VB editor. The code is some very standard code. So we are using Duos objects to store our data. And basically, when you change the item number, I go get the value from the Duos and display it to the screen. When you save, I make sure that we save it. When you delete, there's a little bit of trickery going on because when you actually press the delete button, that's not a confirmation that you want to delete or have deleted, I should say. So we've got a check on the modal dialog to make sure that they've actually say they want to delete. And then if it's okay to delete it, we will go through and delete it. I've got a little bit of code running on the web URL so that it automatically adds the HTTP or HTTPS. And then when you clicked on the hyperlink to make it run, it's just passing that to the Explorer to open it with the default application for a web URL. And on the report, we basically are reading the Duos object and displaying it to the screen. So here we actually get the object, and then here we reading the object. So that is the VBA code, which we're now going to get rid of. So because we're going to try and do it a different way. So let me close this. We are going to go back to here for a second, and we're going to replace this with dexterity. So if we go and we load up dexterity, I must already have it running. I do. So you can't open a dictionary more than once. All right, so I've got a work set created for the window. I have the form here. I've used the dexterity editor to move the fields down and add in the URL field here. You'll see I've added the prompt and the hyperlink button. So this is basically the same changes that you'd see if I'd done it with modifier. Then I have some scripts that I've created which allow me to read the duos and delete the duos and write to the duos. So these are the equivalent of the duos commands in VBA. The startup script is where I register my triggers, and I have triggers on the CRUD events. That's create, read, update, delete. So here's the display, here's the save, here's the delete, here's the URL and the zoom button. I've also got a trigger on the RW function, which then allows me to modify the report and get the report, all the data onto the report. So all of this code, I just compile it. It's all good. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to run the dexterity utilities, which is going to run a macro, which will create a chunk. So I've created the chunk file. There it is with today's date. I'm going to copy that into the live environment. And when I relaunch GP, it flashed for a second, but it included the new code. It didn't ask me about including new code because I have the auto install chunks equals true dex.ini setting. So that ensures that my chunks get added automatically. So now if I run the report, you'll see that I now have a third window. So this is Power Tools allowing me to dynamically choose which version of the window. Normally you'd change this with security. I'm cheating here and letting Power Tools ask me. So if I choose C, you'll see that I now have no dots. So it's not modified, it's not VBA, but the code is still working and I can still open the browser window. Okay, close that. All right, now the report, if I ask it to run the modified version, it is going to include the VBA code. So I'm going to have to go turn off or delete that VBA code. So how about we go and do that? If I go into customize and the VB editor, okay, so two ways I could do this. One is to actually change the event mode and say never. So that will stop the VBA running. The other thing you can do is actually delete the code. Or you can actually go and delete the VBA files. So I might do that later, but for now, if I run the report, you'll see that I've run the modified version, and that now is being populated not with modifier, but with that RW function that I've included on the report. All right, so that's the VBA version. So if we go back to here, next one is replacing it now with Visual Studio. So let's close out from here. And I'm going to pop open another browser we're going to go and delete those VBA files. So one thing that you can do is if you sort it by type, okay, I'm going to need to make this bigger. If you sort it by type, you'll be able to find the VBA extensions. Oops, if you go to the right place, Dynamics, type. Okay, so if the VBA file is only 4K, it's actually blank. If the VBA file is bigger than 4K, like this one, the Dynamics one, that's one that actually contains data. But I'm just going to delete all the VBA files, and that will get rid of all the VBA that's on the system. Okay, so we come back to here, and to actually get the VB or the Visual Studio Code to work, first thing I need to do is DAG or run the dictionary accelerate assembly generator on the modified window that will get me a modified version of the, there we go, the modified DLL. So this is a DLL that gives me access to the modified version of that window. So if I go into my project, so here is my project. It is almost identical to what we did before. So here are the handlers for the different events. So there's display, save, delete, the URL, and the zoom button. I have also created, we go down the bottom here, JAWS read, JAWS write, JAWS delete. These are line for line the same as the dexterity code, allowing me to read and write JAWS objects. And then in the actual code itself, the .NET code is behaving exactly the same as what the dexterity code was doing. So I've got an event on the delete, save, the delete button. There we go. There's the code for adding the HTTP and the zoom. I also have the code here, which is going to create a report writer function to achieve getting the data onto the report. Okay, so I'm going to now just save that, build the solution. Okay, we're not seeing the whole window. Build succeeded. All right, so I can close that. I can copy. So that is now copied the DLL into the add-ins folder. So that there is my custom code. So now when I launch GP, okay, and we can go back into cards, inventory. So I'm going to run the modified version of this. You'll see that there is a dot to say it's modified, but the functionality is now happening because of, not because of VBA, but because of the VB.NET code that's running as that add-in DLL. And again, the report will work. So if we print the version of that, you'll see that it has the Winthrop DC on there. Okay. So next, we can do exactly the same, but this time we're going to use Power Tools to do it. So let's go, and I'm going to do two things. We're going to go into GP Power Tools, go into the dictionary control, and we're going to ask it to remove the dexterity code that's there, and hit OK. So that will get us out, and I'm going to delete the item URL. So now we've got rid of the dexterity and the .NET versions. So if we relaunch, so now there's no VBA, there's no VB.NET, there's no dexterity. If we run that window, Stop the triggers. Stop. Project triggers. Open it. No. Run with the modified. So you'll see this is not getting populated, and the report is not going to contain the data. There'll just be a blank spot here. Okay, so it's not working anymore. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this back on to enable the script. So this here is a script that is the report writer function that is going to go and get the data from the Duos for the report. I've got the same events. I've got save, read, delete, the button, and the field. If we look at the code, we go into, let's say, read, you'll see when we look at the code, it's on the same event on the display existing record, and we look at the code, you'll see I'm just getting the Duos value and populating the field on the window. So it is doing exactly the same thing, but now as Power Tools triggers. So we go back to the project setup, open the window, start the triggers, open the modified version, and you'll see everything is now functional. It opened the browser, and if I click on here, you'll see the web URL is back on the window. So that just shows how you can achieve exactly the same by all of the different methods. So I just wanted to also highlight a couple of different examples for you as well. So we've got, okay, which one? That was the VBA one. Okay, so here, I'm going to show you some other things that you can do with Power Tools. So this one is an example of using a custom form. So if we go into project setup, clear. So this is the SOP quantity, this one here. Say yes. Okay, so this is opened up the SOP window, and as I pull in a transaction, it's fine. As I click on each line, you'll see over here, this is a custom form, which is using the Visual Studio Integration Toolkit custom form module, and Power Tools together are just displaying the current warehouse levels. My data is not hugely exciting, but if there was other items in other warehouses, you'd see them listed here. And that window just is automatically opened and closed with sales order processing. Okay, so another example is using virtual fields. So we'll get another project, clear that. So this is virtual fields on the, okay, so this is on the item maintenance window. So I'm going to open up the item maintenance window, and you'll see that there are fields actually at the bottom here. I've linked it with a customer number. And I've got the same sort of triggers to deal with the events, but these are not modified windows. See, this is no dot. This is not a dexterity window. This is code that has expanded the window and added fields to the window, and the fields can do different things and store different values. So now, that's the unmodified version of the window. If I reopen the window and say, get me the modified version, you'll see here the modified code is working. I've got the item URL there, and Power Tools is populating that field. But as well, I now have these additional fields that are added as virtual fields. And it doesn't make any difference whether it's the modified or the original version, they just get added. So that just shows you a little bit more that you can do with the ability to add fields without using modifier. So, okay, so POP receivings, that was actually a demo that was used. This is form control by itself. So let me go in here, clear, form, and it's the POP receiving demo. Okay, I think it's disabled, so it's make it enabled, open up POP receivings. So this is the one where we didn't want you to have a shipment invoice. So it comes up and says, no, you can't have that. So that is just implemented using form control, validating the POP type field that must be a value of exclamation 2, which means not 2. Okay. So what's going on? Cancel. I've lost control. Where are you coming back from? Thank you. Okay. The last thing was that customer status video demo, which was shown in the previous session. Give you a little bit more of a look at that under form. And that is the customer virtual one. If we enable that. So if I open up customer maintenance, you'll see that it's added this field and it will show me the status of, so you can see this one's on hold. If I point to it, it will tell me the customer's on hold. But this shows up everywhere. So if I go to transactions, sales, transaction entry, and I pull up a transaction, you'll see it's been added here. If I pull up transactions, sales transaction entry, you'll see it's there. So it's every single window in the entire product. It's added to with just the one form control trigger. So, all right, just a few different ideas for you. So, okay, when you're developing with Power Tools, if you are going to use Power Tools as your solution, there is some best practices that you can use. Hold on. The toolbar should be disappearing, but it's not. Go away, toolbar. Okay. Okay, we'll do it this way. I want to get to there. Okay, so this article takes you through some of the best practices. It's a living document, so I'll be updating it as we go along. So, all right. And let me get to the next page. So some final thoughts. Here's a comparison of all of the different environments and what they can and can't do. So there are limitations in most of these methods. The Power Tools really doesn't have any of those limitations anymore, though. So it is the best solution for replacing VBA. All right. So if you need to find me, I'm fairly easy to find. The winthropdc.com/blog will get you to the blog. That also gets you to the actual website. My email address is just david@winthropdc.com, and it's @winthropdc is my Twitter account. So that basically is the end of the session, but I can now go through and answer questions and do demos. There's a note there from Scott about the quokkas. So it is, he hasn't spelled quokka quite right, but it's this guy. You want this guy, you can have this guy. We'll send him out to you. Hey guys, I'm back. I just got told that my headphones got muted. So we missed out on the last bit of the Q&A. So I was asking if there were any questions, but I'm not sure if there were. So I did show you the happy quokkas. You just didn't get anything I was actually saying. So I acknowledged that Devon was the responsible for the POP receiving sample. And and showed where you could get the samples in the chat. On the sample page. I might actually just throw that page into the chat so that you've got that if you want it. But I have at least until 10 more minutes if anybody wanted to see anything. Otherwise, I will disappear again. So make sure you... Okay, there's the samples. And make sure that you sign up to win yourself a Quokka on the virtual swag bag. Okay. Yeah, when I reached over to grab the Quokka, I have a little gizmo that would have gone and said that, I pressed the button and it stopped working, so that's my fault. All right, I'm going to disappear again. Thanks, guys. Have a great rest of your day.